Every unplanned purchase you made this year probably felt completely reasonable in the moment, and that is exactly the problem. Americans spent an average of $282 per month on impulse purchases in 2024, $3,381 over the course of the year, according to Capital One Shopping's analysis of consumer spending data. That is not a rounding error in someone's budget. That is a vacation. That is a car payment. That is months of meaningful retirement contributions, quietly redirected toward things that, if you are being real with yourself, you probably barely remember buying. And here is what makes this number sting. 89% of shoppers admit to impulse buying. This is not a you problem. It is a design problem. And once you understand how the system works against you, a simple 72-hour rule becomes one of the most powerful financial habits you can build. Let's start with what is actually happening in your brain when you want something badly in a store or while scrolling at 11 at night. When your eyes land on something appealing, a jacket on sale, a new gadget, a piece of furniture that would look perfect in your living room, your brain's reward system activates before your rational mind has a chance to weigh in. Dopamine, the chemical associated with anticipation and pleasure, begins to rise. Research on human impulsivity published in behavioral neuroscience journals has shown that increased dopamine activity directly heightens the tendency to make impulsive decisions. The catch is that dopamine spikes at the anticipation of a reward, not after you get the item home and the packaging is in the recycling bin. The brain gets its hit when you click Add to Cart. The actual satisfaction that follows is almost always smaller and shorter than the feeling that preceded it. Daniel Kahneman's framework from his decades of behavioral economics research describes this split as two distinct systems of thought. System 1 is fast, emotional, and automatic. It is what fires when you see the sale tag and feel the urge. System 2 is slow, deliberate, and rational. It is what would normally run a cost-benefit analysis on whether you actually need this thing and what you are giving up to get it. The problem is that modern retail, both physical and digital, is engineered specifically to keep System 2 offline for as long as possible. The urgency countdown timers on checkout pages, the one-click purchasing that eliminates every moment of friction, the only 3 left in stock warnings. These are not accidents. They are deliberate psychological triggers designed to get your emotional brain to commit before your rational brain can object. The Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis has written directly about this mechanism in the context of personal finance, noting that people tend to be emotionally disconnected from their future selves. The present is vivid and tangible. The desire you feel right now is real and immediate. The financial consequence 3 months from now is abstract. Your brain does not experience future financial strain the way it experiences the present excitement of a new purchase. This is what behavioral economists call present bias, the tendency to give dramatically more weight to immediate rewards than to equivalent future ones. And present bias does not just affect low-income households or financially unsophisticated people. Clever Real Estate's 2024 survey found that 35% of Americans admit to prioritizing short-term gratification over long-term financial stability, including half of Gen Z and nearly half of millennials. So where does the 72-hour rule fit into all of this? It is built on a simple neurological truth. Dopamine-driven urgency is temporary. The emotional intensity you feel about a purchase at the moment you see it does not hold constant. Given enough time, the emotional activation fades. Your rational mind reasserts itself, and research on delayed gratification, going back to Walter Mischel's foundational work at Stanford on children's ability to wait for larger rewards and extending through decades of follow-up research, consistently shows that the capacity to pause between impulse and action is one of the strongest predictors of better long-term outcomes across financial, social, and health domains. The ability to insert a waiting period is not about willpower in the white-knuckle sense. It is about giving time for the emotional charge to dissipate before you act on it. The 72-hour window, specifically 3 days, matters for 2 reasons. 24 hours is not long enough. If you really want something, you can still feel the pull of it at the 24-hour mark, especially if you have been returning to the website or leaving the item in your cart where the reminder emails will find you. 48 hours is better. 72 hours is the point at which most impulse-driven desire either resolves into genuine intention, you have thought about it, decided it fits, and you are going back for it, or quietly fades. In the second scenario, you wanted the idea of the thing more than the thing itself. The urgency was a product of the moment, not of any real underlying need or carefully considered desire. Here is a pattern worth recognizing in your own behavior. Think about the last time you almost bought something but walked away, or closed the browser tab, or left something in the cart and forgot about it. How often did you think about that thing 3 days later and feel genuine loss? For most impulse purchases, the honest answer is almost never. The item stops existing in your mind as soon as the emotional spike has passed. That is the system working in your favor when you give it time to do so. James Clear, in his research on habit formation in Atomic Habits, makes a point that applies directly here. He writes that the most effective behavioral changes are not built on motivation or discipline. They are built on systems that change the environment so the behavior becomes easier or harder to execute. The 72-hour rule is not a discipline strategy. It is an environmental intervention. You are not telling yourself no. You are telling yourself not yet, and that distinction matters more than it sounds. No creates internal resistance and triggers the psychological phenomenon called reactance, where the restriction makes the item feel more desirable. Not yet, in 72 hours, removes the emotional charge without triggering the resistance. It is a pause button, not a stop button. The 3 common mistakes that undermine this rule are worth laying out clearly, because most people who try waiting periods give up on them before they ever get the payoff. The first mistake is keeping the item accessible. If the product is still in your cart, if the browser tab is still open, if you have saved the item to a wish list, you are re-exposing yourself to the emotional trigger every time you see it. The way to use this rule effectively is to remove the item from your immediate environment entirely. Close the tab. Do not save the item. If it is something you find in a physical store, take a photo of the tag, just the name, the price, and the store, and walk out. You have the information if you decide in 72 hours that you want to go back, but the item is no longer looking at you. The second mistake is making an exception for sales. But it is 50% off and the sale ends tomorrow. That pressure is precisely the mechanism you are learning to recognize. Scarcity and urgency are the 2 most powerful tools retailers use to compress the time available for System 2 to weigh in. If something was worth buying before you saw the sale, it is worth waiting 72 hours to confirm. If it was not worth buying before the sale, it is still not worth buying. You are being moved by the discount, not by genuine value. The third mistake is applying this only to large purchases. The data on impulse spending shows that the average unplanned purchase is under $30, but the average American makes nearly 10 of them per month. The financial damage is not from the occasional big splurge. It is from the steady accumulation of small, automatic purchases that feel too trivial to evaluate carefully. Think about what $4,200 a year, roughly what the average American impulse spends, would look like if it were redirected instead. At a 7% average annual return over 20 years, consistent with historical data on long-term stock index performance, that is more than $225,000 in added wealth. The math is not complicated. The behavior is what most people never change, because nobody has given them a system simple enough to actually use. Here is your concrete step for this week. Set up one trigger, a specific phrase you write on a sticky note or a phone lock screen, that functions as your pause mechanism. Keep it short and neutral. 72 hours. That is it. The moment you feel the pull toward an unplanned purchase of any amount, you see the phrase, you close the tab or leave the store section, and you set a reminder on your phone for exactly 72 hours. When the reminder fires, you ask yourself one question. Do I actually still want this? If the answer is yes, and it fits your budget, you buy it without guilt. You have done the work. If the answer is anything less than a clear yes, you do not buy it, and you just kept that money in your life. B.J. Fogg, the behavioral scientist at Stanford's Behavior Design Lab, found in his research that tiny, specific, low-friction implementations of new habits are dramatically more likely to stick than sweeping behavioral changes. A sticky note and a phone reminder are about as low friction as it gets. One thing worth tracking, after 90 days of applying this consistently, go back and count how many 72-hour reminders fired and how many of those resulted in a purchase. Most people who do this find that somewhere between 60 and 70% of the items they paused on never got bought. That percentage is the system working. That is $3,000 a year, or more, staying in your account. Not because you became more disciplined, but because you gave your own rational mind a fair chance to weigh in before your emotional brain committed your money. The single most powerful behavioral shift from all of this is deceptively simple. Create distance between the urge and the action. The urge is not the problem. The urge is human. It is normal. It is the product of systems that have been optimized specifically to create it. The action is what you control. 72 hours is the gap that gives your financial goals a seat at the table before the emotion makes the decision. At NextGen Finance, every framework we build is designed to give you tools that actually change behavior, not just information that sounds useful and then disappears from your daily life. If you want to keep building that kind of practical financial foundation, subscribing means you get a new system every time we publish, grounded in research and built for real people managing real money. What is your relationship with impulse spending? Do you have a strategy that already works for you? Or does this feel like an area that quietly costs you more than you realize? Drop your honest answer in the comments. I read every single one, and your experience shapes what we tackle next. This video is for educational purposes only and is not financial or investment advice. Please do your own research and consult a licensed financial professional before making any financial decisions.